Everybody in the zone, I just want to welcome Brad Balukjian to this episode of Overtime. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me, Jackie.
Yeah, I'm really excited because today we're going to chat about Brad's book, The Wax Pack. Seriously, such an amazing book. We actually just were discussing prior, you don't even need to be a sports fan, but if you are, you'll probably love it even more. So just to give our viewers a little bit of background, what is your professional life? Obviously, you wrote this book, but you have other things going on. So just let everybody know, what's going on in your life.
Yeah, I always like to say that I chose the professions that required the most education and training, but ended up with the least money at the end of the day. It was like, I think I'm allergic to making money, but I follow my passions always. So I am by training, I'm a biologist and a journalist. I teach biology at Merritt College in Oakland, California. And so I have my sort of professor life and wear that hat. But I actually do that part-time, and my other time is as a freelance writer. And usually I write about science because that's sort of what I know best. But for this book, this is my first book. This was completely outside the science realm, obviously, and just an idea that I had that I knew I had to see through. And so this is my first sort of narrative nonfiction book. It was my chance to finally get to do all the tricks of the trade of journalism that I learned when I was studying in college, and then I worked for a magazine after college. So I always wanted the space to try to write something long, and so it was really nice to finally get to do that with this book.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't put it down. So let's just, you can kind of figure out from this little part right here, on the open road in search of baseball's afterlife, kind of what the book is about. But just if you wanted to give everybody a couple sentences about what this book is about,
Yeah.
essentially.
Well, the on the surface, the premise is pretty simple. I got a pack of baseball cards from 1986 that had never been opened. And I said, whatever guys are in this pack, I'm going to track them down all over the country on the ultimate road trip adventure and tell the story of the road trip, but also, of course, what happened to these guys when they were done playing. So it really was meant to focus on what do you do at the end of your career and beyond, when you're in your mid 30s and all of a sudden you could never do the one thing you've spent every waking second and probably sleeping second thinking about, which is something that no other profession really can relate to.
Right.
And on the trip, being in my mid 30s, the book it really is not just sports. It's a mix of travel and sports and memoir. And, I'm very much a character in the book, and I'm very open about sort of my life and try to draw parallels between the experiences and the lives of the players and my own life and experiences.
Yeah, that definitely came across. I was going to say you got very personal as well, which is interesting to see. Just somebody who's his first book, and has so much information about these guys, and like you grew up loving, and like basically they're your heroes, and now
Right.
here you are cultivating this story, and just very candidly. And I thought that was very relatable as somebody right now who is the age you were when you did this road trip.
That's
So
right.
yeah.
And I was really conscious to not make this book about hero worship.
Mm-hmm.
These were my heroes, but I don't think it doesn't make you stretch intellectually or as a person to just hear about how great your heroes are. In fact, if anything, the book is meant to humanize and make these very, literally sort of two-dimensional flat baseball cards come to life as telling the stories of the players on the baseball cards. And I think one of the take-home points of the book is you realize that you have a lot more in common with these professional baseball players than you ever realized, because what comes out in the book are all of these unexpected things about their struggles with the same things we deal with,
Yeah.
broken relationships with their parents, divorces, drug addiction. I mean, these are the things that come up in the book and really become much more of the storyline than reliving old baseball games or baseball heroics.
Yeah, absolutely. It's more like lifestyle than stats. And although you intertwine that information, which totally resonates with the vibe of our website, we focus more on
Right.
lifestyle than like, hey,
Yeah.
this is the box score and this is that story. So definitely a book that our readers would love. Now, it seems to me as a reader that very early on in the road trip, it seemed like, okay, this is going to be a success. Like you were successful seemingly right away. And when did you realize that this could potentially be a successful road trip? And also, um, were you surprised by that?
Well, I think it's funny you say that because you're right. Early on, have a lot of momentum. I mean, even in the first chapters with Rance Mullenix was great, but then again, I end up getting so drunk I'm passing out on the side of the freeway, which is not exactly
Yeah.
what you want to be doing, right? So clearly, I have some growth to do
Hmm.
when it starts that way, but I feel like that. So I ended up, the book really follows in chronological order what happened over the 7 weeks that I
Yeah.
was on the road. And I think I just got lucky with sort of the ebb and flow of how successful I was finding players, because really the book it's a narrative, it's a story. And in any good story, you want to have some conflict and some dramatic tension. And if everything is good all the time, it's not a very interesting story, right?
Hmm.
So I think it worked to my advantage in the beginning. I had a lot of success finding players and having these great experiences with them. And then kind of in the middle, I run into all these challenges, right? And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, players are blowing me off, or I have to go to some extreme lengths to try to find them. And that creates some of that conflict and that tension that ultimately I think is good for the book, because the reader is sort of wondering, well, what's he going to do, or is he going to be able to find all these guys? And in fact, I didn't find all of them, and
Right.
so I think though it's a better book for not having found everybody.
Right. Absolutely. So, getting into a little bit of the details of the road trip, I just want to ask you some of your favorites, least favorites along the way. So, what was your favorite stop that you made?
Well, I think the whole encounter I had with Don Carmen, who was my favorite player as a kid, has to be the kind of the highlight of the book.
I
And
knew you were going to say that. I
well,
just knew.
it's pretty obvious when I think when you read the book that he's kind of if I had to say there was one kind of star of the book, it's sort
Yeah.
of him.
Yeah.
Um,
And he
and
wasn't even in the pack.
no, he was.
Oh, he was.
He was, yeah, yeah.
Oh, why did I think I must have misread that then? For some reason, I thought you were like, all right, I'm doing this and I'm adding him.
No, I
Oh,
think
but
what I
that's
said was
great.
like he's one of the only players to get like 2 chapters. So
Oh,
I
okay.
went out of my way to go to Oklahoma where he grew up, which was
Okay.
like
Okay.
a complete detour. And then I say in there, like, I know this is being biased, but he was my favorite player. So I'm going to do so,
Yeah.
bear with me here.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Okay. Well, good. I'm glad he was. I think that's awesome. Very
Yeah.
cool.
And he was, he's such an unusual guy, and so sort of just special in so many ways that chapter or that story of his is one of the most powerful, I think, because again, it gets at that theme in the book of vulnerability. And
Yeah.
that's, if I had to say that is what the book is about in one word, it would be vulnerability. And I think among men, it's an especially important theme to explore, and especially among men of that generation, because they don't tend to be known for their vulnerability. So
Right.
that was one of the nice surprises, was how many guys like Don Carmen were willing to tell me some really heavy things about
Yeah.
their pasts.
Yeah. That's great. See, how lucky are you that he came in that random pack? You're like this, my favorite player growing up,
Yeah.
which the way you describe why he's your favorite player is really actually kind of hysterical. So if you want to tell our readers why Don Carmen is your favorite player,
You mean
that would be cool.
the letter F thing?
The letter F
Yeah.
and yeah.
So yeah, well, I grew up in Rhode Island and was a Phillies fan. And the only reason why was because, well, number one, I never followed the crowd. So I should have been a Red Sox fan, but
Yeah.
I didn't want to just do that. So
Right.
I was probably 4 or 5. And for some reason, this I know is also weird, but I had a favorite letter, which was F. I don't know why I had a favorite letter or why it was F.
Yeah.
But then I heard the name Philadelphia Phillies and I thought, well, there you go. There's my,
Yeah.
that has to be my favorite team. Obviously couldn't spell very well, but too late. And I became a diehard Philadelphia sports fan. And then among the Phillies, my favorite players were always the guys that were not the star players. My heroes were the journeymen and the middle relievers and all of that. And so he sort of fit the bill as a non-superstar player for the Phillies that I grew up with. And then I think when you read the book, there's another layer of this, which, I'm not one who's prone to say like, oh, it was meant to be, or it's fate, it's fate. But there were a lot of crazy kind of similarities that came out between me and him and the kinds of people we are and the way we grew up that I think kind of cemented the whole thing.
Yeah, that's great. What is your relationship like with him now, if any?
It's pretty cool. So again, having your favorite player like be in your phone and have a occasional texting relationship is pretty cool. He just actually I heard from him about a week ago. He was doing a radio show and he texted me a clip of it and said, "Hey, I told these guys they should talk to you about your book." So it's been really nice. Like I would say we've stayed in touch. Right before the pandemic started, I was at spring training and with my dad, and we got to have lunch with him. So I got my dad, who's in the book, and so
Yeah.
he's kind of part of the story. Got to meet, my childhood hero, Don Carmen. So that was a really cool thing to sit down, the three of us.
Absolutely. And that's perfect that you just brought up your dad, because I really loved that chapter. I think just talking about your relationship growing up and then having him be part of the story was really awesome. But there was one part where he literally printed out directions and you were like, it's going to take him till 2020 to figure out Google Maps. So did he figure out Google Maps? It's 2020.
Yeah, I know. And I don't think he has, because last that I was, he's actually here with me in Rhode Island right now, and I have not seen any evidence of Google Maps
Oh, that's
being in
hysterical.
play. Yeah.
That's really great. That's awesome. So we just passed July 4th. I mean, it seems like yesterday, but it was really like 3 months ago. So how have your July 4ths compared since spending with Jamie and Ginny? How is it just?
Yeah, no comparison. So
Yeah.
I always feel like I'm one of those people that my New Year's and my fourths never really met. Like there's too many expectations there, like
Right.
I don't
Once you
have,
get into your 30s, you're like, who cares? Like,
yeah.
who cares?
So you'd have to have me like sit down with like pen and paper and really think about what I've done on the 4th since that time in 2015, because that was just, so memorable. And so one of the, on a trip that was full of a lot of running around and chasing and sort of not a lot of rest and kind of a lot of chaos at times, I look at that as like, that was this nice little moment of just sort of stability and tranquility in the middle of the road trip that I really appreciated, because I was really like dropping in on this long time. It was like the classic American barbecue,
Yeah.
he was there with his longtime friends and I just dropped I might kind of parachute in as this random guest, but they next thing you know, we're playing Cards Against Humanity. And
Yeah. Oh, that's
great.
awesome. Okay, back to the favorites. This might be the same answer, but I feel like you might be able to answer it differently. But your most meaningful conversation that you had, not necessarily specific conversation, but I guess conversation over the course of like a stop.
Well, I think there's several to choose from
I
there.
know.
I think the stuff with Randy Reddy was actually kind of, it was meaningful and fun, and so that's a situation where I had sort of over 2 different days with him and did a
Yeah.
lot of different things. And we go bowling, we drink beer, we go to the gym, we go get breakfast. And of all the guys that I met, he was the one that I felt the most like immediately comfortable with. Like he could
Yeah.
have been one of my buddies from college and we're just hanging out.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I must have felt pretty comfortable if I bring out Tinder within like an hour of meeting him, right? Like
Yeah.
showing him how to use that. But that whole dynamic in the background of that, at least for me, and I tried to convey this in the writing, is that there's sort of the elephant in the room, which is like what happened with his first wife,
Yeah.
who had had this, tragic heart attack, and I had no idea if she was even still alive. And it's something I wanted to bring up,
Yeah.
but it's how do you bring that up in a compassionate way that doesn't seem too out of left field? And so it's kind of like the whole time I'm wrestling with that, and and sort of there's that anticipation of like, am I going to do it? I mean, even for me, as I was living it, I was like, am I going to do this? When am I going to do it? How's he going
Yeah.
to react? Is he going to? There were a few moments like that where I didn't know how these guys were going to react, like Gary Templeton asking about illegitimate child, or Don Carmen asking about his father, Carlton Fisk, that whole thing, like
Yeah.
with what's going to happen there, so there's a lot of suspense for me.
I can only imagine. I mean, I'm reading the book and I'm like, does he find this guy? Does he, like, what's going on here? Oh my God, I got to keep reading. It was just so good. So speaking to that, I don't know, also could be the same answer, but the most surprising conversation or stop or
Well, I'd say the two things that jump out at me are Rick Sutcliffe when we're driving around suburban Kansas City, and all of a sudden he's volunteering the stuff about his father,
Yeah.
Who ran out on the family. And I knew that basic story, but I mean the way that he conveyed his anger and disappointment with his father was so like raw that I didn't know he was going to go there.
Right.
And then I think the stuff at the end with Al Cowan's son, who told me this story. So Al Cowan is the one player that had passed away.
Yeah.
So I went and was able to talk to his family members, and his son telling me this crazy story about right before his father died, they're having a fist fight in the street and the whole neighborhood's watching, and the dad goes in to get a gun. I mean, it was like, again,
Crazy.
this really surreal, some of the stuff that came out there. But beyond any one encounter, what was the most surprising thing in a pleasant way for me in the whole book was how much it ended up being about much more than baseball, and about, I mean, I like to describe the book in a way it's kind of like holding a mirror in front of you. And maybe more so for men because it's very focused on male relationships, but
Right.
all the stuff we're talking about earlier about vulnerability, and I think I've had a lot of people write me since the book's come out and tell me that what they most appreciated about it was that they found themselves, hours later mowing the lawn and thinking about the things that I provoked about, like their relationship with their dad, or relationship with their son, or some of the choices they had made. Like, I think because of what I share and what the players share, it kind of presses on people to reflect on
Yeah.
their own lives and how they've lived their lives. And some people, I think, don't like that. I mean, there have been people that have not liked the book, and I think it's because it kind of puts that in your face a little bit, right?
Goes
And
too deep for them.
right, if you don't want to go there, it makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and I've had, as a writer and a creator, I've had to accept that there are going to be people that don't like it because of that. But I'd rather them have some kind of reaction to it than to not have any reaction.
Right. Right. That makes total sense. Totally. Okay. So these were some things that you mentioned in the book that for some reason just like stuck out to me. So let's play a little game. I'm just going to say them and you're just going to tell me your first thoughts
Like
on it.
word association kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We're going into, I have a degree in psychology. We're going into that.
Okay.
Okay. So Tommy Lasorda, like he's still kicking. So
Well, I mean, the first word that came into my head was jerk, because that's what I was told. That's
yes.
the impression that I got from Rick Sutcliffe.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Tommy's got all kinds of stories, but I never had any experience with him. But the Rick Sutcliffe stuff about Lasorda was pretty clear that he wasn't too happy with Tommy.
Yeah.
There's that whole story about how he felt like Lasorda didn't follow through on his promise, and then he went in to go tear up his office, and it's kind of a funny anecdote.
Yeah, totally. So I don't know. I just think it's amazing that he's still around. Anyway,
Yeah.
the 2017 Houston Astros.
So
Is there an asterisk next to that championship?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think the Astros, I did not. I mean, they deserve all the heat that they've been getting. But it's also funny if you read the book, that I describe the Astros, and this is how the book is already dated, because I described them as this like quaint, fairly small market team that no one has strong feelings about. And in 2015, when I was on the road trip, that was still pretty true. But it just goes to show you how quickly a team's reputation can change.
I know, because you mentioned them a couple times, and I'm like, I don't know if people think this way anymore. So I got to ask him about that.
Definitely not. That's changed. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So what's next for you? Can you see yourself writing another novel?
I can definitely, there are definitely book ideas that I have that I'd like to look into. For me, this was such a challenge because the book got rejected 38 times. And the reason why it took so long to get published was because it going through all that back and forth. So I do think that the book, having done well, will hopefully make it a little bit easier the second time around.
Yeah.
Most of my book ideas are more back in the science realm, because that's, again, what I'm most familiar with. And a lot of people have said, oh, you should do a sequel. But for me, it's not, I wouldn't be doing it for the right reasons. Like creatively, I don't think it could measure up to the original. So,
yeah.
But I want to do more writing projects. I will always be enchanted by the story of sort of unsung athletes and what happens to them. So I'd love to do more along those lines.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Telling the unknown stories.
Yeah. So a couple things that stood out to me was just the way you are able to create such an image with your words. Not all authors can do that. And I just was really impressed. I'm reading it. I'm like, I actually can picture what's going on here. And that's not always the case. So if I'm sure anybody who likes to read would appreciate that aspect of the book, and it would keep them going if for some reason the storyline wasn't something that they can like stick to or follow along, which I mean, I'm sure most people can. So I really love that. Another thing, which I'm so glad at the end that you brought this up, because I was like, where is Sophia? Like, where did she go? Like, did she go to California? Did she come back? Is he with her? Is he going to marry her? Like, what's going on?
What's so funny with that is that, since the book came out, I was friends with her on Facebook, and I hadn't talked to her in a while. So I saw her on Facebook, and maybe she even responded to one of my book posts. And so I messaged her and said, do you know you're in the book? And she's like, what? No.
Oh my God, that's
awesome. So I sent her the book, and she really enjoyed it. And it turns out she lives in the Bay Area now. And I think she kind of goes back and forth to Naples, but but I think she's in Naples now. But there's a good chance maybe I'll see her sometime soon, you know, because
I want you to date her and marry her, because that would be perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so what did I miss that you want to say, that you want to talk about, that you want to let our readers know about
Um,
this book?
no, I think we covered the highlights, and I
Yeah.
think I just tell people, don't, if you just expect a, you know, kind of baseball statistics oriented book like most baseball books tend to be, don't buy it. But you know, if you really want to get into the people behind the sport and the
Yeah,
players, that's really what this book is about, is understanding these guys as people and
yeah,
even as peers. And there's a lot to be learned, I think, from their, you know, their experiences.
for sure. Everybody needs to read this. And so one of the, on the back, there's all these reviews. I'm going to read this one review, and then I have something to say about it. So here's a review if you guys are interested. What if a pack of baseball cards could come to life? It sounds like a Spielberg movie plot, except it happened. It happened because Brad Balukjian made it happen in real life with the most eclectic cast of baseball characters ever assembled. And the result is one of the most fun, honest, funny, human, and uniquely creative baseball books of the year. I'll admit it. I loved the Wax Pack. However, that made me think, I'm like, this would be a good movie. How do we get this made into a
Yeah.
movie? Is what I
So
want to know.
so there have been some people that have reached out to me about wanting to adapt it, and you're right. It is very cinematic, right? It
Yeah.
has, you could easily see. I mean, I even use that as a way to write. Was I kind of pictured each chapter as like a series of 4 or 5 scenes in a movie, and
Yeah.
that helped me structure the book. And so there's some people that are trying to, you know, adapt. How would you adapt it into a screenplay? So we'll see. I mean, it'd be awesome, right? It'd be really
Yeah.
cool to see it happen.
Yeah. I would be first in line. Um, okay. Well, I think that's it. I mean, I've been talking nonstop about how I loved it. I think I'm going to give it to my mom next.
Nice.
She loves baseball. So,
How did you find out about it? Just out of curiosity.
honestly, I came home and it was in my mailbox. So
Oh, okay.
somebody, I think Adam
Oh yeah.
sent it to me. I had chatted with Greg, who manages the website, and I was like, great. I love to read. So they were like, I guess this is the person that's going to read this book. And I'm really happy that I was that person. And it was the best surprise. And this, like, the cover, like, looks like, you
I
guys
know.
can't see it, but in person, this looks like the Wax Pack, like the outside, like,
They did a great job with the design.
so great. So great. And I did love the part when you said you ate the gum.
Yeah. Lived it,
Have
lived it.
you recovered?
Yeah, yeah, no.
I can't even imagine having, like, eating gum that's that old. Like, that's crazy. But
It was rough.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, thank you so much. We are starting a book club, I do believe, for In the Zone, and this is definitely going to go on there.
All
I would
right.
read it again and talk about
Excellent.
it again.
Cool.
So we'll
Yeah. Well, if you ever want to, yeah, have a group discussion, I'm, you know, happy to
yeah,
get. I've done a few book clubs, and it's always fun to see what people pick up on.
yeah, for sure.